Good afternoon, everybody. This is Ben Thorpe, Associate Editor with Farm Equipment Magazine. Thank you for joining our latest webinar in conjunction with DIS. We've got a great discussion about AI lined up here. I'm very excited to learn about it. But before we get into that, just two quick things. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a little control panel. There's a small Q&A icon. Please send questions there at any time during the presentation. Then at the end of the presentation, we'll go through as many as we can, time permitting. And we are recording this webinar, and a replay of it will be available on the website later on. But that's all from me. Let's get right into it, and I'll let John take it away.
Thanks, Ben. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad you could make it here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my circumstances while we're just have a few more people joining. I just had a storm roll through. I'm in Central Florida, and I am currently operating under solar and using satellite internet so that I can make sure I have a continued connection here. But the world has changed underneath us, so I am 100% embracing my work from home strategy right now. So I can tell you that there is about a 70% probability that my phone will ring even though it's in do not disturb, about an 80% probability that someone will knock on the door, and 100% probability that my dog will bark. And this is kind of the new world we live in. So I think what I'll do to start is give you a little bit about my history, and before I jump right in, just so you can kind of get where I'm coming from, because I like to refer to myself as an industry pundit, because I spend an awful lot of time maybe being critical, but oftentimes supportive of seeing the agricultural equipment industry, specifically the dealership industry, utilizing technology. My background is I started in 1988, which is roughly 34 years ago, I guess, in 30, yeah, something like that, in a John Deere dealership in Exeter, Ontario. I worked with a software company that I later purchased with some great partners and some good friends, and we grew that software company into what was known as PFW Systems. We were responsible for, at some point, 20 to 30% of the agricultural equipment market in terms of their IT technology. Well, we grew that for 20 years. It later was purchased by ADP, subsequently spun off to CDK, and now is working under the name Vital Edge. During that time period, I also had the opportunity to work very closely in a competitive mode and a cooperative mode with DIS, who supplies, I would say, is probably the preeminent supplier of computer systems and dealership management systems, specifically to the agricultural and heavy equipment marketplace. And then I even had a stint with E-Emphasis at the same time. So I've always been involved with technology companies, always been involved from the dealership side. I've done everything from stand behind the parts counter and do parts transactions, to sweep the shop at night, to trying to help dealer principals understand what their financials look like. But what I'm really interested in more than anything else is seeing that the marketplace grow and trying to have the marketplace keep up with the changes that are coming. And that's kind of where we'll start our presentation today, because really what I wanted to talk about was AI. I've done a couple podcasts with this, and thanks to DIS for sponsoring this event and bringing me in. I get the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. Last year at this time, I was doing podcasts talking about ChatGPT and how it was likely to change the world and people should pay attention. And I wasn't the only one. You couldn't turn on a television station without hearing a broadcaster say that their article had been written by ChatGPT, or that university students were running amok, getting their papers, that we'd all be out of a job. We wouldn't need lawyers or accountants anymore, marketing campaigns and things like that. I think that was just the initial panic of what AI was. And for those of you who are not aware, AI is what we refer to globally as artificial intelligence. You'll hear people refer to it as machine learning. It really, more than anything else, is the ability to amass huge amounts of data, and do pattern recognition, and come up with certain reliable and somewhat sensical answers. But the real exposure and what brought everybody into being interested was these chatbots or conversational models. And it started originally with what we would put in our houses with household devices like the Google infrastructure or Amazon Alexa or things like that that actually were heavily vested in your house. And then as this conversational nature of AI grew, so did people's interest. So to start, what I'd like to do is take you back, and I want to take you back to the 1800s. When we look at the farming equipment industry in the 1800s, imagine yourself being a farmer, looking out over your field. The population had just crested, the global population had just crested $1 billion. And 97% of the farming that was actually done with a human being involved at the critical pivot point. So whether that was somebody holding a plow, somebody digging a ditch, somebody, hand planting seeds. So we fast forward that and to something closer today, and now we're looking at cresting 8 billion people, and 97% of the work is now done by automation. So whether it's by combines or tractors, or whether it's done by precision farming, GPS, there's very little human intervention, a lot of human risk, but very little human intervention in the physical act of farming. And it took about 100 years to go through that evolution, which later became a revolution, and essentially multiply times 10 the productivity that was happening. I think what's scary in the AI world is this is happening in accordance with Moore's law, which means year over year, we're doubling what our ability is to adopt and use technology until such a point that the technology probably is closer to running us than we are running the technology. And in some respects, that's kind of where we are today. So what I'd like to do, first of all, is take a look at AI as it exists in the existing dealerships. If you go a long way back with Farm Equipment Magazine, I did a podcast webinar 6 or 7 years ago talking about the big push for big data and analytics. And what we were talking about then was the huge amounts of data that were stored inside the dealership through your business systems. So if you were using DIS Quantum, Quipware, one of those applications, you were storing everything from who a customer was to when they purchased, what they purchased, how often they purchased it, what parts they used, what machines they owned, how often those machines broke down, when they were serviced, how long it took to get serviced, what the flat rate was on it, how the technician performed on the flat rate, how the manufacturer paid on the flat rate. And I could just go on and on and on about all the data that you accumulated. And so what had happened is over 30 or 40 years of a traditional equipment distributor, those ag dealers had accumulated these huge volumes of information. So the next step that we did after that, and the webinar I did at that particular time specifically related to analytics, which was, okay, you're sitting on this huge pile of information. How do you get it out and get it into a meaningful format? And that's really where we looked at analytics. And a number of dealers are there today. And if you're not, I strongly suggest that you call whoever your supplier is and ask them for their advanced analytics program so you can start sorting through the data and realize just what kind of a gold mine you're sitting on. While that was happening, the machines got smarter and smarter. And what they started doing was taking that big data and building machine learning applications around it that said, okay, if we know how many work orders are open, then we should know the average time that it takes us to close a work order. And if we know the average time that it takes us to close a work order, we should know the technician that did it. And if we know the technician that did it, we should be able to isolate who our A-class technicians are and who our B-class technicians are. We should also be able to say what the average rate between failure is on a part, on a particular item, on a particular machine. We should be able to see what our performance ratios are and our key performance indicators and push them out to people. And that's typically what people refer to as machine learning. So the machine itself is starting to take that data and make very general correlations between the different data points and what it might mean to each person as they look at it. So that's kind of a good dealer is there today. Every dealer should be looking at big data and analytics. A good dealer is starting to use machine learning and starting to make certain judgments on it. And then we get to step three, which is what we refer to as artificial intelligence. And that's where we make not just plain data-driven decisions, but we start looking at advanced pattern recognitions and do forecasting. So we're not looking at things that happened. We're starting to look now at things that are going to happen based on the intellect that we have in play already. And this has been happening in the dealership under a wide variety of names and programs. And not everybody is aware of it, but we've actually had artificial intelligence working in your dealership management system for some time. And I'm going to give you a couple examples. But before we do that, artificial intelligence is based purely on data, and it's all data structures. So there's no questioning it. It's only a case of understanding the information that the systems hold, and it's a very rational decision. It's not an emotional decision, and it really doesn't replace the decision-making properties of humans. So you'll hear us talk about AI and EI. And EI is the reason that you can sleep at night. And EI is the reason that you don't have to worry about machines taking over the world. And EI is the reason that you will always be valuable in your dealership, whether you're a consultant, whether you're a parts counter person, or whether you're the dealer principal. And that is because you have one thing that artificial intelligence doesn't have. Artificial intelligence is based exclusively on data. It doesn't have intuition. It doesn't have a gut. And it doesn't have the ability to relate human to human. So your emotional intelligence is always what plays. And that's when you sit and talk to a farmer and you start to look at weather conditions and you look at the face at his face and you know that it's going to be a difficult year for him, or he comes in with a spring in his step and you know that he's got something going on, and you know that the crop yield is going to be higher than what he expected, or you know that he comes in with a certain attitude and it's related to how his equipment's performing and when his equipment is going to break down, or how fast you're going to get it repaired. All of that is the emotional intelligence. And it's critical that when we talk about this, we're not talking about having a computer run the dealership. We're talking about the computer providing you with intelligence so you can make emotional decisions and striking that balance perfectly between what's actual data and what you know from the gut. And it's not unlike if you talk to anybody over the age of 50, they'll just kind of nod and say, we know. Well, what they know is based on an intuitive decision and based on a gut decision. And we shouldn't discount that. So if we talked about the applications that are currently involved in the dealership that really already use AI, the first one we talk about part stocking and inventory management. Well, it used to be a simple in-out opportunity. So we would, stock parts based on usage and based on calendar usage or maximum stocking levels. What changed with AI is we started to look at more individual criteria when we were doing part stocking. And I'm going back a lot of years now. It was a Nashville show when Case decided they were going to release something called the Determinator. It later became known as Availability Max or AMAX. I believe it's still in play. John Deere came out with something called Auto Reclass and had an online parts management system that took care of that. I think Kubota just recently announced one called Smart Supply. All of these are basically AI analytics programs that go through and look at your existing inventory and then make a forecast based on more than just ins and outs. They base it on historical usage. They also base it on machine population, machine downtime, shipping. They start to look at what the global supply chain looks like. Also even factors in seasonality. This year, the Smart AI programs are studying the fact that there's a 42% greater chance of hurricane and tropical issues happening in the southeast of the United States. So its inventory should be moved from warehouse to warehouse. It's a far more sophisticated program than just doing ins and outs or min and max on part stocking. So that's been there for a while. The other thing that we use right now a lot of times in software packages, specifically in DIS, they start examining things like predictive maintenance. If we know how often a machine breaks down and we know how many hours the farmer's using that machine and we have some idea of the last time we touched it and how it's coming into play, what we can do is take a proactive stance by monitoring the equipment and by applying specific algorithms in terms of usability and how often it needs to be maintained. and we can start to get ahead of the curve, guaranteeing uptime. Those are all well, customer trend analysis. Sorry, the last one on there. That's just simply taking all of the information that you know about your customer, and instead of making it a strictly emotional decision, and saying, okay, he's a good customer, he's having a good year, he's going to buy this much equipment. It's now backed completely with data. So what we're doing is backfilling, saying, okay, we're going to blend our emotional intelligence on that, but the artificial intelligence is going to come through and give us, on any given customer, probably 50 to 60 parameters of what their activity levels are with you. And we can start to come back and say, okay, this is what they buy. So this is not rocket science. This isn't future. This isn't, Buck Rogers and his Apple Watch in this, 26th century. We're talking right now about very specific applications that already exist in the marketplace. The real challenge is going forward, we have to start to be prepared that we're going to have more and more of these AI applications that are going to enter into the market space. And what are we going to do with them? Well, the primary reason that everybody is so excited about AI, and the reason you've heard so much about it for the last 12 months, is item number one. And that is that what it will start to do right off the top is automate repetitive tasks. So if there's something that has to be done over and over and over again, the system can take care of it. So if there are marketing campaigns that need to go to specific customers based on specific purchases or based on specific criteria, whether it's purchase levels or your stocking levels or availability levels, AI can take care of those communications and take care of them for you automatically. So I think that in itself is probably the first place that you're going to see it. I think how you're going to see it deployed into dealerships is going to be by way of a chat bot. So I'm going to ask you to put on your forward-thinking glasses for a minute and look into the dealership and imagine a time where instead of somebody calling in asking if their parts order is ready, asking if a part's available, asking if a machine is available, when the machine would be ready, asking when you can deliver, asking if you have rental products available. All of these things could be automatically handled through a chatbot. Most of you have used a chatbot. Excuse me. Anyone who's asked a question about an Amazon product has already used a chatbot. Anybody who's had to book an airline ticket or cancel an airline ticket. I'm notorious for sitting there typing, find me a human, find me a human. But you can generally get somebody to answer those questions. But the chatbot will field about 80 to 90% of those questions, and that's based on the fact that it has access to your data. It also has access to more global data and can formulate a good, reasonable answer. If it gets confused, it can bump to a human. So that'll automate a lot of those routine and repetitive tasks. The next piece is using AI to enhance decision making. So instead of just using a traditional dashboard or a traditional analytics page that says this is the way things look, AI can now we can now augment those analytics dashboards and say this is the way things look projected based on current information. So you can have a pretty good idea within 10 to 15% how you're going to finish your month, at midway through the month, based on current trajectory, based on what we're doing currently. You can get a pretty good idea on when your inventory is going to arrive based on past usage and based on a number of other parameters that AI would get acquired through the supply chain. Number three is the one that I think is probably the most exciting. I have had the opportunity to work with Ron Slee and Learning Without Scars on the construction side of the business. They've put together a very comprehensive training program for everything from technicians to service managers through parts counter people, all areas of the dealership. And rather than sit there and train individuals and put a basic core curriculum into a university or a trade school that nobody's going to teach, they've used AI to come up with a series of very sophisticated avatars that look like people, that speak multiple languages, that can deliver a curriculum online. And this is not just unique to the equipment world. We're finding now in remote areas that we will have avatars that are teachers that will teach curriculum using AI to children online, even if they have to attend a school because they can't get a teacher. This can all be done with AI behind them and give us the opportunity to bring people up to a certain skill level. The last piece I think is probably where it really takes off for me, and that is augmenting the entire customer service effort. There is no more leaving a voicemail for anyone. In fact, fewer and fewer of the transactions that are going to be driven through the dealership will be driven through a telephone call. There was a time where the most exciting thing you could get was a screen pop that if somebody called, that number populated your system, and immediately the person that answered knew everything about that person on the phone on the other end. I don't even see that as being remotely usable going forward, because what's going to happen is people don't want to talk on the phone. They simply want to get onto an online system and have their customer service questions answered, whether by a human or an AI, or as what I believe in this case will be a hybrid. So it'll augment your customer service to be able to have somebody operating from home, operating from inside the dealership, operating from halfway around the world, be able to give them the kind of answers that they need and have it tailored specifically to their inquiry, using a full piece of background too at the same time. So when we talk about AI and decision making, you heard me refer to it as pattern recognition. So the first part of this is something we've already done, which is data aggregation, and that continues to grow. So I've already challenged you to go back and look at your systems and see how much data you have and see the ways that you can pull it out. And if you can't pull it out, get in touch with someone and have them show you some of their analytics programs and show you the opportunities to be able to pull that information out. But that data aggregation is going to continue to grow. And I'll give you a prime example. I'm holding up my phone. I turned it on yesterday morning only to find out everywhere that I went last month. Google provided that for me. Apparently, my phone tracks where I'm moving, and it shows me I had one of my busiest months ever in the car, going from place to place to place. Showed me how many miles I covered, how long it took, the average spend on gas, fuel. So it's giving me the opportunity to understand more about what I do. Think about the equipment now with the telematics and the sensors that are in equipment already. We can start to record when it's being used, how often it's being used, and what kind of conditions it's being used in. So we're going to continue to grow that aggregate of data. The other thing I will tell you is that data aggregation is going to spread across dealerships. So you're going to be in a position where your data will only be part of a bigger data pool. And that's really where AI shines. So if you can imagine all the case distributors sharing data aggregation, so when a piece of equipment comes in, it's not just what your history is on how long it takes to change out a hydraulic pump. It's going to be the history of every case dealer in the system that's aggregated that. So even if you've never done the job before, you're going to have some benchmarks in terms of what it takes and how to do it. Advanced analytics is the machine learning piece. And again, this is the part that we're going to find very specific patterns that aren't always readily available for the human to detect. And by that, because we were looking at such huge volumes of data, you can come to the conclusion that says every time a specific combine is used for a specific number of hours, we have a group of parts that fail. But more often than not, it's a key part, and we're seeing it because we're not looking at one instance. We're looking at hundreds of thousands of instances of that part being replaced. We're going to be able to come back and use those advanced analytics. And then with that data in our hand, we're going to be able to plan strategies going forward. Everything from resource allocation to marketing spends, to knowing who your customers are, to knowing what customers you need to spend time with, and which customers you don't need to spend time with. And of course, continually fine-tuning your inventory and deciding whether or not you even need to stock that inventory, whether it's complete goods, whole goods, machines, or parts. I've talked about this before. The AI does this on a regular basis, and that is tailoring things specifically to the customers that you're dealing with. EI, you know a little bit about a few customers. AI knows everything about all the customers. And again, primary example, I don't think any of us have ever been on Amazon and seen customers who like this also bought. And I'm going to tell you, if you're honest with yourself, more than one of us have fallen prey to it. And we probably will continue to. But it knows that if you're buying certain items, there are certain items that go along with it. And that's no different in the agricultural equipment dealership market space. If you know a customer has a fleet of a particular type of tractor, combine, and you know how it's being used, you can start to make specific recommendations in terms of parts and service. And going to the next slide, you can see the predictive maintenance on that. So if you know it's going to break down before they know it's going to break down, it's your chance to be a hero. It's also your chance to get in there and keep their uptime at a maximum by proactively fixing machines as opposed to reactively. And then the last part is customer marketing, because we're all going to fight for the same piece of the pie. The one who knows the most about the customers is the one that's going to win. So if you can use AI to improve your overall engagement, it'll keep your customer retention numbers high. Everybody wants to be special. So when you start looking at particularly targeted marketing campaigns, phone calls, and things like that, it can make a pretty significant difference. So these are just a couple of the things that I thought were interesting when we were talking about it. We're going to see some of this specifically in the operations of the dealership, but we're also going to see things happen on the outside of the dealership. So we talk about machines. We know that precision farming exists. I don't think we've even scratched the surface on the way that that's going to operate in the future. And again, with AI being able to make more intelligent decisions and be able to handle larger and larger volumes of data. I don't work in that area specifically, but I have seen some of the things that Husqvarna is doing, and it's interesting to say the least. We talk about smart equipment and the IoT, which is known as the Internet of Things. Those can be small items, big items, everything from RFID barcodes to having phones track technicians on where they go to electronically keeping people connected to the internet. Theft of equipment, theft of machines is going to continue to decrease as more and more people can LoJack their items and have them tracked as items disappear. And I'll give you an example right now. I don't know how many people here have started using Apple AirTags, but it's become extremely popular in a number of industries, specifically automotive. Where thieves know enough to disable GPS and things like that, but we can hide an Apple AirTag in a car and track it by anybody who has a cell phone, within a certain distance of that car, anywhere in the world, and it really is changing the nature of security that way. And then the last one is what they call virtual and augmented reality, and I think this is probably the most exciting. I recall a software application specifically, much similar to the ad that you see here, where you could point an iPad or a laptop at a tractor, at a specific part of the tractor, and there was a pre-recorded and a pre-analyzed repair manual that went with it. So you could actually see what was going to happen with an overlay on top of the reality. And that's really what augmented reality is, to say, okay, so we have one layer that's the actual that we're looking at, and then we're going to overlay on there artificial intelligence that says, okay, this is how you remove the tire, this is how you remove the following brackets, this is how you lift the pump assembly out, and this is how you disassemble the pump assembly. So a lot of that is coming forward. Now, I know everybody looks at this and says, well, this is way off in the future. Based on the scale, based on the rate of growth right now, if we're talking 3 to 5 years, I'd be surprised. So where are we going to push it? I think what you're going to find is going to happen in the agricultural side of things. We're going to push it through inventory management, all the things that I talked about using the supply chain forecasting, all the data elements that come in there. Obviously, the benefit for that is we're going to save a lot of money and we're going to have improved availability. So those applications will continue to grow and continue to fine-tune those algorithms as we have more and more data available. So I think you're going to see your inventory management continue to grow. Predictive maintenance, I think I've said it 100 times in this presentation. We want to be proactive, not reactive. We're going to find an opportunity to minimize downtime by understanding what's going to happen before it happens. We're not going to continue to fix airplanes while they're in the air. We're going to make sure that we know before harvest comes and before you get in the middle of your busy season or your planning season, that those pieces of equipment are ready to go, and the meantime between failure has been stricken off the list. So we know exactly what we're going to deal with. Your customer relationship management, or CRM, again, this is just the enhanced communication that we're going to have with the customer. everything from your experience from start to finish. And I'll give you an example. I said I'm in Central Florida right now. On the corner of my watch, which I'll hold up right there, is a magic band. I wear it because I go to Disney on a regular basis. But by using it, Disney tracks where I am. It also tracks how much I'm spending. It also tracks what I like to do. So tomorrow morning, when I get up and I go to Disney, I can get a plan already assembled for me that says, based on the fact that it's going to be a Friday, and based on the fact that you're going to be in this specific park, crowd levels will be as such. We know you like this, and it will force onto my phone a plan for me to follow for the day. I don't have to follow it, but I can tell you if I follow their plan, I'll get to do more, I'll get to eat more, I'll probably wait less. Unfortunately, I'll probably spend more too, but they're driving my experience to make it the best one that they can by using technology and data elements to put me in the position that makes me the happiest. The last piece is business intelligence, and this is where the EI kicks in again. Uh, EI is your gut decisions. It's kind of nice to make a gut decision, but you don't want to be like your parents. And what I mean is, why can't I do this? And the answer is because I said so. What you need to have is more than because I said so. You need to have the data elements behind that say, okay, this is what I think is happening, and either have the data elements to prove it or to disprove it. It'll give you a competitive advantage because if you're looking at the data and your competitors are not, and if you're not trying to manually pour through hundreds and thousands of line items of data elements, and you've got an AI and a competitive analytics system pushing that information to you, you're going to get to make time-based decisions that'll make a big difference. So who's doing it and who's going to have to do it? Well, all of the software suppliers are going to have to step up, and this has been a campaign that I've been on for the last 3 years. I think it's important to talk to your software suppliers, to ask them what the roadmaps are, to ask them what kind of applications they're coming up with. And more importantly, I think you need to give them the feedback to say, this is the kind of applications we need. This is what's important to us. After all, you're the dealer. You're the one in the field every day. You're the one that talks to the customers on a regular basis. Coming back and telling them without limitation, this is what I think I need. I don't think anybody's going to be able to react to everything you say, but I think more importantly, if somebody says, this is what I need long term, you're going to drive those suppliers, and you have a responsibility to do that. The most important part is it's going to be seamless integration. So I think what you're going to find is that this is going to continue to be pervasive into the software. Nobody knows that it's happening. As your inventory control programs get sharper, smarter, and faster, it doesn't have to change your operations. It just has to be better, and it has to seamlessly blend in there. There is some customization that's going to be required. Different dealers are going to have different needs in terms of where they want to put their efforts with AI. And then the last piece I think is most important, and that is most people are using software right now. And if you took a hard look at it, had a consultant come in, had one of their trainers come in and look at the software you're using, in my experience, I haven't seen anybody who's ever used more than about 80% of what the software was capable of. So I think it's important to get that continuous support and train your people internally so that you're not just doing things because that's the way you've always done it. The market is changing underneath you. You have to be prepared to change with the market. You have to continue to learn and know everything that you're working with. What do you do with your employees? Well, the biggest thing you're going to do is automate it. The first thing that everyone came out and said is, well, with ChatGPT, we'll be able to get rid of 5 people here and 2 people there and 4 people there. The answer is, with intelligent AI, you shouldn't be getting rid of anybody. What you should be doing is allowing those people to focus on the value-added activities that they do and take away the mundane tasks. You can train them better. You can take care of customers better. You can make smarter decisions. I think what you're doing is you're using AI as a tool, not a replacement. Nobody ever came out and said, okay, here's a screwdriver, and here's a better screwdriver, and here's an electric screwdriver. All of them required somebody to hold the handle or pull the trigger. People are still going to need to be there, but what we need to do is we need to take those mundane tasks away so we can get people to really do what they need to do. These are just a couple examples. Obviously, the enhanced decision making, be able to train more, be able to train each other, be able to work share, be able to take jobs that typically would have been um, above what their traditional pay grade was, because they have the opportunity to learn. They have an opportunity to become better because they're not being weighed down by the traditional minutia and the mundane tasks. And then the last piece, again, it's all about customer service. If we have enough tools and we use those tools properly, we can maintain and continue to grow that customer base. And the solution still maintain. The solution still is the guy with the most happy customers wins. So, what should you do moving forward if you're going to think about it? You got to start thinking about how your current operations are and what areas could you start to look at using more machine learning and more decision. Then the second thing is get a hold of your suppliers and start getting an implementation and training plan together. If we need to do more, we need to teach people more, and they need to be able to do a better job at it. The third step, keep an eye on it, see what's happening, start to see where the results take place. The best spend is what we would call it. Find out where you're getting your maximum bang for the buck. And then the fourth step is the one that we don't do in this industry, and that is to innovate and evolve. We just have a tendency to trudge along and do things the same way we have. We don't have 100 years for this transition to take place. This transition is going to take place in a decade or less. So if we want to stay at least on the curve, if not ahead of the curve, we have to have a constant thoughts about innovation and evolution and how we're going to evolve in this marketplace. Um, DIS in particular has brought myself and a number of other industry experts. They have a fantastic team there, and we regularly look at product innovation and the opportunity to start to use cutting edge solutions and how we're going to utilize this to be able to deliver tools to the dealer. But again, the responsibility, I think, as much as it is a responsibility for the software supplier, it's definitely a responsibility of the dealer to come to that supplier and say, okay, this is the type of thing we're looking for. Somebody needs to come up with the next great idea. It's going to happen from within the industry. It's not going to happen from outside the industry. So somebody inside needs to look at the best way of doing this. I could share with you some of the construction side. I don't think it's fair in this particular meeting to take up your time, but there are opportunities right now where people are looking at new ways to get mechanics, new ways to train mechanics, new ways to fix machines, which is a challenge in the construction side. In the ag side, it's going to be a very challenging issue to find the next generation of people who want to work in a dealership. So one of the opportunities is going to be to come back and say, okay, it's an exciting place and it's a place filled with technology and opportunity. So I would suggest you get with your supplier, be it DIS or otherwise, but get with your supplier specifically and tell them it's time for us to look at what we're going to do tomorrow. Excuse me. This is that gratuitous slide at the end. Tells you what I like to do, tells you what I like to think, but most importantly, my email address is there at the bottom. I welcome your comments, good or bad. I'm always interested to hear what you think. And if you don't want to do it through an email, send me your phone number and I'm happy to call you back. And we'd like to talk about those kinds of opportunities. Ben, I saw that you just unmuted yourself and I am right on schedule.
You were watching closely. Thank you very much, John. Very informative. One of my favorites as of recently. And we did have one question come through. If anyone has a last minute question, if they put it in now, we will be able to answer it. Christy asked, when does Learning Without Scars anticipate being available in Canada?
That's a good question. Christy, the best thing to do is if you just drop them a line through LinkedIn or look up Ron Slee, Slee, individually, he can probably give you some ideas. I can tell you Ron is a Canadian by birth, so it's not going to be foreign for him to do it. And a number of us who work with Ron are in Canada. Right now, most of the trade schools and the accreditation has come in the U.S., but I know that they want to do the same thing in Canada. It's just going to be I imagine there's some hoops to jump through to get it accredited.
Okay. And I had one last wrap-up question for you, John. For anybody who wants to kind of learn how to use an AI program, myself selfishly included, do you recommend one online that you could just, is there like a free one people could play with to learn about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple ways to do it, and Ben, I think I mentioned to you I might do this, so this is gonna be a little risky. So what I didn't tell you about myself is I hate to do presentations, and more than hating to do presentations, I really hate to make slides. And I know there's some people here who've had a history with me and know that I would rather just stand up and talk to 1,000 people than to try and prepare a slide deck. I'm not sure this is going to do exactly what I expect it to do, but I'm going to give it a try right now anyway. And I'm just going to come back here and tell you that everything you've seen so far in this presentation was generated through an AI app. So when I started this, and by the way, this was not a softball by Ben. He really didn't know I was going to do this. I actually came through here and the night before last, I think it said 3 days ago, I went through here and I actually gave it the points that I wanted to talk about. Obviously, some of them are repetitive because I ended up with a couple repetitive slides, but that happens when you put down your thoughts. You come up with the same thought over and over again. Within a matter of minutes, I came up with two presentations that I liked. I won't make you go through a second one. We don't have to do this all over again, but just to give you an idea what it looks like, this one was a little too futuristic for me because I was afraid people were going to think I was designing new tractors. But you can see what's happened is I basically sat in here and in a matter of 35 minutes generated 15 slides that I hope were relevant to a presentation that I had that hit all the points that I wanted to. So Ben, the answer to your question is there's not one program. There's dozens of programs out there. This particular one is called Gamma, and I found it simply by going to Google saying, I need to do presentation slides in AI. And it came up and said this was my best choice. If you said, I need to write a resume in AI, you might get kicked into Bard. You might get kicked into Chat GPT. I have to be honest with you, I had to put together a lease agreement for someone the other day. A real simple lease agreement for an Airbnb, and they're like, "Can you do me a favor? Do you know how to use AI? Can we write this in?" And all we did was sit down with an application. In that case, it was Microsoft Copilot, and say, "I need a lease agreement, and here's the basic terms, and it's going to be handled in the state of Florida." And within 30 seconds, it had spit out what was a far more professional and comprehensive lease agreement than anyone else could do. So, I mean, you've got to be prepared to stretch and look this stuff up. I'm almost a little disappointed that there was only one question, because every time that I sit here and look at using this AI on a regular basis, I usually walk away with more questions than answers. I usually walk away with more reasons to use AI, more opportunities to do it. I keep telling everybody I'm in Central Florida. I'll be back in Canada at the 1st of May. And I sit down with an AI-based application and say, what's my best route home? It comes back and says, what is it that you'd like to eat? So it's actually planning my way back home based on restaurants and things like that I could see and do.
All right. And someone asked if I listen to Queen, and I do on occasion. Good question. Okay, that is helpful, and I actually am going to explore that Gamma app later and not tell anyone in the office I used it to make my next set of slides. So thank you very much, John. That's going to wrap us up for today. Today's presentation and audio will be available on the Farm Equipment website. If anyone wants to go back and review it, you can watch your email and the Farm Equipment newsletter for more info on that. So on behalf of the team at DIS and John and all of us here at Farm Equipment, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Please reach out and let us know if there's anything you want us to cover in the future, or what you thought of this event. So on that note, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, John, and hope everyone has a great afternoon.